Okay, I want to bring you back to our top story now. President Obama using his executive powers to force through some sweeping changes to the immigration system in the United States. And with me to discuss all this is Stacey Hilliard, who's Vice Chair of Republicans Abroad here in London. Also Rob Carolina, Chair of Democrats Abroad UK. Thank you both very much for coming in. Rob, let's start with you if we can. It's been a long time coming, much needed. Why are the Republicans making such a hoo-ha of this?
Oh, I wish I knew. I mean, John Boehner went to school in the same state I did, state of Ohio. And when you go to school in America, you learn in year 7, year 8 about the U.S. Constitution, about separation of powers, about the independence of the executive branch, and about executive authority that rests with the President of the United States. What the President has done, what he has announced, is within the scope of his authority as Chief of the Executive Branch.
So you're happy enough with the situation. Stacey, how do you see it?
Well, I see it quite differently from Rob. Over 20 times this president has actually said, this is not within my authority to have sweeping immigration reform through an executive order. But yet, when he loses the midterm election and he sees that he's going to be up against a Republican House and a Republican Senate, to me it seems a bit of sour grapes. It's a bit of a sore loser. And it's the arrogance that this president has had that says, I know what's better for the American people than the American people do.
His argument will be, we've been waiting from the House of Representatives for a year or so to come up with something. It's not doing its job, so I've got to get on with it.
I appreciate his arguments, but my response to that would be, if you really want to see compromise and you're really willing to work with this Republican Congress and Senate, then do it. Why do it 2 months before they come into office, before these Republican senators and congressmen are sworn in? Why are you doing it now? And I think that this president has been very subjective when he wants to use an executive order and when he's actually wanting to use Congress. And he's showing that he wants to bypass Congress when it's something he believes is best for the country, but when it's something that other people within the United States feel that should be done, such as action in Syria, he's more than happy to say, oh, no, this is not my congressional authority.
I mean, one of the issues with this, Rob, is that it is not conclusive, is it? We've got about a 3-year time frame on it for a lot of these people. So would it simply not have been better to hang on, grind it out, and find some sort of common ground with Congress?
Well, there's always an inherent risk with the use of executive authority, that it hinges upon who happens to be the executive from time to time. But coming back to a point that Stacey made in terms of what the American people want, there's been a poll recently from NBC and Wall Street Journal saying that 74% of the American people want a solution like this, which is to say, looking at a situation where we have so many people who are undocumented, who can be and are being productive members of society, who are nonetheless stuck in the dark economy, unable to pay taxes even if they want to.
Something that works for everyone. I presume that is the thinking, is it?
Well, nobody's arguing that we don't need immigration reform. That's very clear. And I'm from Texas, from a border state that has to take this on day in and day out. And we see the ramifications of human trafficking that happens when these types of executive orders are placed. And every time this has been done throughout history, going back to the 80s, there's been an increase in illegal immigrants. There's been an increase in human trafficking and child trafficking coming across the border. And this is something that is irresponsible of the president, instead of working with Congress saying that we're going to put 3 years on this and see what happens. We don't know what's going to happen after that. It is be much smarter for him to sit there and work with the Congress and work with the Senate to come up with a real solution.
This is the bottom line, isn't it? Because we're all sitting here discussing it very reasonably. There is a large dollop of reality, which is the Republicans do not want to work particularly closely with Democrat president, particularly with this president. It's been an uncomfortable 6 years trying to rub along together. We've had more, and it goes both ways, though, I think, Rob, you'd agree. President Obama really having a bit of a lash out at Congress in his announcement.
Actually, I couldn't disagree more with that. I disagree very strongly with the second half of your statement, because if we roll the clock back, if we look very clearly at what happened when the Democrats had a majority in both houses of Congress and the White House, the first 2 years of this administration, we had a Democrat in the White House, Democratic House, Democratic Senate. Our president spent the better part of a year attempting to get even one Republican in either House of Congress to come on board with one of the biggest legislative changes he was attempting to adopt. And even with, and that stalled what could have happened much more quickly. Even then, it was difficult to make accommodation. I'm glad that Stacey mentioned the 80s, because if we want to talk about use of executive authority, a good old Republican president, Ronald Reagan, in his last 2 years of office, was issuing executive orders at a pace of about 40 to 45 a year. This president has issued fewer executive orders than any other president in the last 100 years.
But you have to look at what those executive orders are on. And talking about the stalling in Washington, I mean, we can play lobbynomics with numbers, and we can really come up with an argument that suits ourselves. But the fact is, we have a number of bills sitting in the Senate that Harry Reid has refused, the majority in the Senate has refused to even allow to go to vote. The president has time and time again said that he does not want to work with the Congress. He says he does, then he doesn't, then he does an executive order. And it's about a lot about flip-flopping and back and forth. And it hasn't seen a real commitment. And the president has used all of his political capital to try to get the health care reform passed, instead of actually looking at how can I spend this wisely throughout my 2 terms.
Well, we won't move on to health care. We'll never leave this. But let's agree to disagree, maybe. Stacey, Rob, thank you both very much indeed.
Thank you.